and support. My name is Dave Allenbach. I'm one of the co-directors of special services here for Warwick. I'd like to thank Caitlin Reagan, Jen Cardillo, who's the president of WSEAC, who's not in town tonight. She wanted to be here. She says hi to everybody. And then Kerry Walker, you guys met at the door. Thanks to three of them for help put this on. Also, thanks to our representatives from the regional transition. We have BHDDH, and we have ORS here. They're going to introduce themselves, and they're going to give you guys a little presentation as well. All right, so what is transition? For school's role, so transition would be a program that's for students with disabilities to help them transition to adulthood. So that process starts at age 14. And the school IEP team in middle school, kind of first steps is to kind of do those broad strokes about what comes next, what comes after high school. So, and at this point, the team consists of an LEA, the students, teachers, and the family. All right.
I'm going to move the slides for you.
Yeah, how do you? I think there was a remote around here somewhere too. All right.
Talking about the team.
There you go. All right. All right. So that's how the team starts in middle school. When you get to high school, the team kind of expands to include ORS and BHDDH. ORS stands for the Office of Rehabilitation Services, and BHDDH, just an easier way to say behavioral health, developmental disabilities, and hospitals. Ultimately, it's the team responsibility to continue to develop each of the students' individual plans to achieve their post-secondary goals. All right. How does the team develop the plan? So the team uses a similar process to craft each goal, starting off with the student's interest. So the team uses a variety of tools to identify what a student's interests are. They do interest inventories, they do interviews, even they do formal assessments. Next, from these interests, the team discusses possible goals for a student. And then in that point, they discuss present levels. And present levels is basically what a student already knows about what that goal would be and what they can accomplish with that goal. And then they talk about the strengths and needs. So these are things that they can do, and these are the things that they might need some help doing. And then once they identify those, they talk about what accommodations, so what things need to be put in place or would help a student accomplish a goal. All right, so for the goal areas. So throughout high school, the team takes those broad strokes that we started from the team in middle school and narrows down the scope of the plan. And I don't know if at IEP meetings, when we start talking about transition, the question is always, what do you picture yourself doing 1 year after high school? And they have the three different areas that they look at. They look at career and post-secondary. So what kind of career opportunities are we looking at? Then they look at education and training. So what would you possibly need to accomplish those goals? And then community access and independent living. Are there any questions so far? Sure.
You say they're supposed to talk about this stuff in IEP meetings?
Correct.
My daughter's a senior, and
Never talked about what's coming next?
well, I mean, they've asked her what goals she has, but I haven't learned anything about independent living, community access, and BHDDH has never come to a meeting.
Well, you have to be invited.
They were.
They were.
But I didn't, I mean, I'm surprised because she's a senior, and we
Yeah.
haven't talked about any of that.
Yeah, see me after, and we'll talk with Steve,
Okay,
and see what's going on there.
okay.
And we don't have a lot of control over how the district teams and what they
Yeah.
do, so, but that is something that should be discussed at every IP meeting, so. Anyway, any other questions? All right. So these are the folks that this can help you accomplish these goals. We're looking at the ORS representatives, the BH and DDH, that should be at the meetings. Things to accomplish, like for community access, would be travel training, college planning, vocational school, to try and get some more training or education in the particular field that you're looking to accomplish in the goal. And then there are job coaches that would go out into the community to job sites with folks to help them and support them in the actual job community. Question? Yes.
Who does the travel training? What agency or whatever?
I don't know if you guys are going to speak to that at all. You're
Not really, but I can. But travel training, it depends on what the need of the student is. Every service is individualized, but if that's a part of getting them to employment, then that's something that, ORS can assist with if they're open and registered for our services. We'll talk about how to do the registration and all that.
And like at our transition program, we have students that would take RIPTA, and they would learn how to take RIPTA, on their own. So that would be something that would go with a teacher. They get their passes and learn how to do that as well. All right. So this is my contact information. When you click on the site, we're going to send out this PowerPoint to all of you after the presentation. So you'll be able to click on that and get my contact information. Right. Turning this over to Teresa Curran, Regional Transition Coordinator.
I brought some handouts with me, but I don't think I have enough for everybody, so I'm going to send them. So you'll get them along with the PowerPoint. So, go forward. My name's Teresa Curran, and I am the West Bay Regional Transition Coordinator. So I'm representing West Warwick, Princeton, Warwick. These are all my districts that I work with. The state is broken into 4 regions: North, South, East, and West. So there is a regional transition coordinator in each of the areas. Right now, Megan Gilmartin is East Bay, and Chrissy Duval, who was my vocational evaluator, has now moved into the regional transition coordinator position for Southern. And then we're hopefully going to be replacing Jen up in the north by the end of the week. We're really hoping. So right now it's just Meg and I holding down the fort. So the regional transition centers were established in 1992 by the Department of Education. And they were set in each of the educational collaboratives in Rhode Island. There is only now East Bay Educational Collaborative and West Bay Educational Collaborative. The Northern and Southern collaboratives are no longer. So the last time the Department of Ed had the contract for the 5 years of regional transition centers, we applied for all 4. So now they're all housed at West Bay Collaborative, which is much easier. So we don't have 4 separate libraries and duplicating a lot of the services that we provide. So it's been pretty good. So we work with public schools. We also work with private schools. Really anybody who contacts us who is working with students with IEPs or 504s. We have things that we do for students, families. We collaborate with other state agencies, with the Office of Rehabilitation Counseling and BHDDH, the Developmental Disabilities Unit. And we do meet regularly with them. Every month we meet and we just kind of talk about everything related to transition in the state. Next. So really what we're trying to do is help facilitate the transition to adult life for students with disabilities. And we do a lot of different technical assistance, professional development. We do student events. You can keep going forward on that. We do a lot of training events for educators. Megan does the middle school cohort, which is specifically for middle school educators related to transition. My Center of Excellence is for transition for students with developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities. And we have what's called the Teachers of Life Skills Network, which we do a lot of work with the consent decree and the Department of Justice that's in Rhode Island. So we do a lot of work around getting kids ready to go to work or training or whatever it is that they're going to be doing after high school. We work, have any of your students been referred to West Bay Collaborative for vocational services? Okay, so that's one of the, are you coming?
He's already worked on site and everything 2 times and stuff.
Oh, cool.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, so one of the things that we also wear 2 hats. We are the director of the transition and vocational programming. So we are a vendor for Office of Rehab Services. And sometimes it gets confusing because there's just vocational and then there's the transition piece that we also do. So I'm just kind of build on what Dave was saying.
I have
What-
a question.
Yep.
I'm sorry. So West Bay's transition program, that's different from Florida Public Schools transition program?
Yes. Well, we have our transition vocational services. We're a vendor for Office of Rehab Services. So it's not necessarily a program that kids attend. They get referred for different services related to vocational. So they go out, it could be a community-based vocational assessment, or it could be an in-school. We have what's called pre-employment transition services, where we have groups.
Okay, I understand that.
So, and it gets confusing because there's an agency called West Bay RI, and now that we get confused with them as well. So somebody's gonna have to change the name. Okay. So David touched on this. When you talk about transition planning, it's those 3 questions that they ask at the beginning of the IEP. What do you want to do for work? What do you want to do for training or education? What about independent living? And it can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and it's individual to your student or yourself. And it's really what it is you want to do and helping people guide you to the best possible outcome. And it can be independent living. In the IDEA regulations, it says if appropriate, but I think for all students, one of the things you talked about travel training, all kids need to figure out how to get around in the community. So that is, that's definitely a skill that needs to be worked on. So those are the areas that are put in the IEP. And then after graduation, that's when they look and say, have you met your goals? You get the phone call 1 year after graduation. Okay. So it could be post-secondary education, vocational training, certifications, integrated employment, supported employment, if you need a job coach or a little bit more support on the job, continuing education, adult services, which Sue is going to talk about, independent living, and community participation. Community participation is a big area right now that we're doing a lot of work with, trying to get young people involved in their community so they don't need a ton of support from professionals when they graduate. They're connected to their communities, they have friends, they have things that they're involved in. So that's going to be a big push for the next 2 years. Right, Sue?
Yes.
So these are really the guiding questions: is where's the person, where do they want to go, and how do they get there? And that's really what we are looking at. So when we do the assessment each time, which you can go, because I'm sure you'll start hearing about vocational transition assessments. They start at 14. It could be interest inventories. They could send home, there's a great one, the survival checklist of teen parents, which I highly recommend. I can even send it along with it goes through all different things that you can think about if your son or daughter is able to do. from using the washer and dryer, using the iron, all of the different equipment in the kitchen, just kind of thinking about it globally, like where do they need some assistance? And then getting around in the community, what are they able to do? Communication, do they use a cell phone? Do they text? Okay. Okay. So if you need more information, feel free to contact me anytime. I have business cards that I'll leave, and I will send out the 2 flyers. Just briefly, what those are, on April 3rd, we have Sean Roy and Jennifer Turner coming in. They are 2 wonderful presenters, and they're really going to focus on transition that's person-centered, that's, really looking at building a good life. So it's not just about work, it's about what makes a good life, and thinking about that young. So we're really thrilled to have them. We're thrilled to be able to open this up to families. It's going to be, I think it says 5:30. We have a buffet dinner at the Radisson, and then they do the presentation. We've done it a couple of times in the past, and it's been wonderful. So it's always great to hear from people out of state. Both of them are siblings of adults with developmental disabilities, so they come with that perspective as well, which is nice. And the other one is an agency called, what is it? Sue Raposo.
Best Life.
Best Life RI is doing a series of online Zoom presentations that you can register for. Everything is free. So just thinking about adult life, I've signed up for a couple of them. They're actually quite good.
Yeah, could I say a little bit about that? Actually, is that one of the flyers that you handed out? So, one of the flyers that's going around, as Teresa mentioned, is in regard to Best Life Rhode Island. And they've partnered with an organization out in Ohio called Starfire Ohio. And I'm going to talk about adult service a little bit later, but this is such an exciting thing that they're doing. This organization out in Ohio, which used to be, a kind of a typical adult service agency providing supports to people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, well, they've completely flipped the whole agency on its head, and they don't do that anymore. Now what they do is they support families through mini grants to create projects in their communities that are all about an area of interest, something that they just enjoy doing, either as the individual person with the disability or the family as a whole. And they use the money from the grants, mini grants between $500 and $2,500, and the support of other parents in Ohio who have done these kind of things to hold some kind of really cool event to invite people into their life and start making friendships. And so we have been really working very hard to figure out how can we start doing this in Rhode Island. And this organization, Best Life Rhode Island, has figured it out. So one of the ways that they're starting to introduce people to this is through these, I think it's once a month, sessions that are virtual, just to introduce people to, okay, who did this in Ohio and how the heck did they do it? And how are we doing this in Rhode Island to help families be able to do the same thing? So it's exciting if you wanted to give it a try. There's no cost to it. You just have to click on and give a listen.
Hi. I'm Kristen Livesey. I am a supervisor at the Office of Rehabilitation Services. So my area that I cover is Central Rhode Island, so under West Bay, if you call it that area of Rhode Island. So anywhere from Pontiac, we go Pontiac, Situate, Johnston, Warwick, and Cranston. So anyone in this room, I'm sure if you are working with a rehabilitation counselor, they are under me. So if you have any questions, I'm available after to chat, and I do have my business card up here as well. So ORS is the Office of Rehabilitation Services. We are a state agency. We are state funded and federally funded. We're one of the only state agencies that have that braided funding, and we are an employment agency. Our focus is to work with individuals with disabilities, all different kinds, all different ages, and our process starts in high school. So today we're going to focus on what that high school process looks like, who's eligible, what the referral process looks like, and a little bit about some of the services that we can provide. Oop, I think it's, nope, go back to Oh, no, that is right. Okay. I was wrong. Yep, you're right.
That's the only one they have.
Okay, yep, perfect. Who can participate? Let's go there. So any student with with an IEP, a 504, or a documented disability. So we get referrals from case managers, guidance counselors, school psychiatrists, really parents that call up and say, hey, my kid has, Crohn's disease and we are looking for a referral. We can accept them into our services. So that has changed our eligibility for transition services. Looks a little bit different than it has probably even 6 years ago, where now we can kind of take anyone with a documented disability. The student has to be between the age of 14 and 22, and they need to register before they leave high school. So when we get a referral, like I said, it comes from someone within the school, usually, and we'll get invited to the IEP. That's normally the first step in our process. So we'll show up to the IEP, give a presentation of our services, and then provide some information on how to register for our services. We are completely voluntary, so no one has to participate in our services, and we can't register a student unless we get the referral packet and the registration back. So that's why sometimes you'll get people calling like, hey, or emailing you, I sent you this packet, can you send it back to me? Because we really want to be able to provide the services in a timely manner, but we can't do anything until we get that paperwork back. So some of the services that we provide, they all fall under 5 categories. So we have job exploration and counseling, work-based learning, counseling and opportunities for enrollment in comprehensive transition or post-secondary programs, work readiness training, and self-advocacy. So every service that we provide meets one of these criteria. So we would provide a job exploration, which is really helping students start that process of exploring what their interests are, getting out in the community, maybe doing some informational interviews, really starting that baseline, what do I like and how do I find it? Then there's things like community-based work experiences, which are paid internships out in the community. We have summer work opportunities, which is another paid opportunity. We have things like Career Compass, which is a group-based service, which is work readiness-based. We have things like Try Employment. Some schools have those. So there's a variety of different services that we can provide. They all hit these areas. These services are designed to be an early start for job exploration. Students with disabilities, necessary for movement from school to post-school activities that will maximize their potential to enter competitive integrated employment. That's our goal, is to help people become competitively employed in the community. So to do that, we have to start the process of figuring out, right, what high school student knows what they want to do. I mean, it's very rare anyway. And so we need to find out what people want to do and how we're going to get them there. We start the process young so we can continue on with the student as they grow, and really start narrowing down some of that process. So the counselor works in collaboration with the student, the family, the school system, and other providers. We work very closely with our vendor community and also BHDDH if they are involved as well, to provide services that focus on job exploration, exposure to work, and determining the level of support needed for their community employment. Pre-employment transition services end when the student leaves or exits the high school or when the student turns 22. So that's our pre-employment transition services. That's our school piece. Yes.
What determines whether it's when high school ends or at 22?
So if they are not staying till 22, if that's an IEP team decision, so if that it's determined that the student is exiting at 12th grade and they're 18, then it would end then. However, if you go to the next slide, unless they are continuing past high school into an education, a transition, a post-secondary education or transition academy, and then we can continue working with them under pre-employment transition services. If the student requires a little bit more individual service, they're going to need a little bit more support in terms of getting a job or career, then we can discuss applying for adult services. Yep.
What's a transition academy?
So a transition academy is, so
some school districts have their own transition program, which is an 18 to 22-year-old program that focuses on those life skills in different areas of employment and independent living and things like that. And then there are some different programs that are developed outside of the school districts. There's one at Rhode Island Transition Academy, at CCRI. There's programs like Project Search, different opportunities that kind of fall into those transition needs of that 18 to 22-year-old program. ORS doesn't have those programs. They're kind of they're developed with the school district and or vendors or different things like that, and we're just a component of it. So that's an IEP team discussion. But if a person is going to need a little bit more support, then we would discuss having them apply for our adult services. We have a wide array of services. They never end until the person is successfully competitively employed. So at that point, if they want to apply for our adult side of services, that's an eligibility-based decision. And we have 3 categories of eligibility that we look at. So we look at 7 major life areas, and we determine based on the needs of the student, what their disability is, what supports they're going to need, what category they would fall into, and determine their eligibility. They will be assigned a counselor, probably the same counselor they're working with in high school, and they would develop an individualized plan for employment. That plan houses all services that we are going to help that person with in order for them to become successfully competitively employed in the community. That's a quick and dirty of ORS. I could go on for hours, but that's basically, what our services are. We're a work program. We're here to help people find employment, and we're completely voluntary. Yes.
So when, if someone's accepted, like if they apply, right, and you said they get assigned someone, is that, because right now my son's in the pre-employment, whatever, so he has someone from West Bay.
So he would have, he has an ORS counselor, and they have referred him to West Bay to do some services. So ultimately, it gets confusing because we bend out a lot of our job exploration and services like that. But ultimately, it is the counselor. What school? Okay, so it'd be Nicole Crossett.
Yeah.
Yes. So she's from ORS.
Yeah.
So she will be the one who, if we're looking at applying for adult services, then she'd get the application filled out and meet with you guys, get the application filled out, get the paperwork filled out that needs to get done, and submit it so that we can move forward with getting him into the adult side of services. Yes.
If a student's already in Transition Academy
Mhm.
and they're doing work experience through them, is that actually something that you guys are coordinating at ORS, or is that something that the school department is?
It depends.
Or is this outside of the Transition Academy hours, like it would be after 2 or whatever?
Nope, it happens during the school day. So all of our services
Okay.
happen during the school day. Sometimes it happens on school vacation, sometimes over the summer. But that's a kind of a tricky question because if your student is on a career development plan, then they have to meet 2 60-day work trials in the community. That's a school piece, right? So the school is setting up those pieces. ORS comes in and we provide more individualized services. So if we're just looking at getting somebody out in the community to have them exposed to work, what that looks like, that's part of that career development plan. And they're just trying some different things. So they might go to Burlington Coat Factory or, the Dollar Tree or something like that, just to get those entry-level work skills. When ORS comes in, we're looking at more of an individualized placement. If your child is interested in nursing and they need to know about what that job really looks like, that's what we do. We get them set up with an informational interview. We have them actually maybe do some shadowing. Obviously, nursing is a little difficult of a conversation, right? I should have picked something better than nursing. But we have them do some really deep dive in finding out what that job entails. Looking at transferable skills for that specific job. So do they have the dexterity to actually provide, to do phlebotomy or to work in that environment? We're looking at those things specifically. So if they're going out one-on-one, it's most likely an ORS thing. If they're going out as a group, it's most likely a school career development plan piece. Yes.
How does New Beginnings fall into this? Because my son did something with New Beginnings for a few weeks or something, and went out. Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They're not necessarily, New Beginnings is not a vendor of ORS, so that would have been a referral through somewhere else, maybe through the school to them.
Was it Launch Beginnings?
Watch me.
Oh, because I'm like, no, I'm not, no, yes, Launched. So yes, Launched Beginnings. Thank you, Teresa. Launched Beginnings is another vendor just like West Bay. So they would be working, they're referred from us to Launched Beginnings. There's a variety of different vendors, so.
And can you use different vendors?
You
then?
can.
For like different
Yeah.
things?
Like, how do you
So you're
know?
not committed to one vendor if you said like, we're just gonna use West or whatever it is, I don't.
Yeah, no, so our vendor community for, that provide pre-employment services is kind of set up regionally, right? I say that Rhode Island's so small. If there's a specific need, right, we'll look. But what we do as counselors is really try and match the best fit for the student, right? We know our vendors very well. We know we get our referrals from the school. We get to meet the student. We get to know what their interests are, and based on what we know of, like, oh, maybe I know West Bay's got some great connections in that area. I'm gonna say let's use West Bay. But if at any point you're like, it's not working out, that's when you let the counselor know. And there's other vendors that we can use, right? So that's absolutely something you can change up at any time. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
So with the adult services component,
Mhm.
you said if they become successfully employed, then they're good to go?
So-
Can they come back?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it happens in steps. So because we are strictly employment, right? So BHGDH focuses on everything else. Their process is a little bit different when it comes to adult services. When we look at employment, I mean, I'm sure not everyone here has their first job and is still working in that first job, right? Probably not. So yes, we happen in steps. So we open up, we work with you, you become successfully employed. Even if you're successfully employed but still going to college or a training program for your ultimate career, we wouldn't close you out. We keep you open until you reach that goal. But then, let's say you're working in that job for 5 years and you're like, I'd like a promotion or I'd like to change my career. Call us up, we reopen your case, we keep moving. So yeah, we're a lifelong service, but we happen in steps.
And the first, I know from Vermont, I used to work in Vermont.
Yeah.
Drug rehab. So in Vermont, the rehab was after 90 days of employment, they rehabbed the person and they closed that particular individualized employment plan. And then we built a new one if we needed to.
Yes.
How does that work here?
So we look at 90 days of successful employment. However, the RSA, our federal funding source, has changed their guidance on that a little bit with the Workforce Opportunities Act over the past 4 years, I'd say. So now we're looking at skills gains instead of necessarily successful employment outcomes. So it's a little bit different than that's what I'm saying. Is things have over the past couple of years have changed a little bit. And that's why we can take anybody with a diagnosed disability. And so what we're looking at more is those measurable skills gains. Are you attaining a certification? It's not necessarily focused on that 90 days of employment. However, if you're happy and you like your job and you don't want anything else from us at that time, after 90 days of successful employment, we would close out your case. So, and then you could reopen. So there's a variety of different things.
Yes, so if my son was involved with ORS, but we wanted to try to take a class or two at CCRI.
Absolutely.
That's I would assist him with the CCRI part, I'm assuming, and then you guys do the work part, or how does that?
Not necessarily. So we have services that can help students connect to college. So there are different opportunities. We actually have a program called Connect to College, and it helps students prepare for what that transition is going to look like, meet with disability services, meet with accommodation specialists, do all that stuff, help them really prepare. We have some vendors that will actually take the students, once they get their classes, actually take them through and find their classes so they're prepared for the first day. So those are things that ORS can help with. That's part of one of those 5 things that I mentioned in the beginning. So yeah, we have those services that we can do as well. And a lot of times if you need college in order to get to your goal, right, then we can work on college. If you don't, then that would be something that we would discuss, right? But if that's, or if you need a certification, like if you need to be CPR first aid certified in order to get your job goal, then we'd look at that. Yes.
How does all this, like, for my son and his motley crew of buddies, I would consider disabled, but the reality is, they're not gonna be, hopefully they'll find some type of job. The reality is, how does this affect their social security and their ability to maintain, as they go through life?
It's a very big fear. Yeah, we have.
Are they gonna like be enticed into getting some type of, I know they used to run a lot of programs in different places, different academies and stuff to give them certificates, and as soon as they got their certificates, Social Security said, oh, you're fine, you're off the program.
Yeah, no. So right now we have certified benefits counselors in the state of Rhode Island. We have like 6 right now that we work with, and we work closely with them through this. They're actually through the state. So we can fund benefits counseling for you. So you would know exactly how much money you can earn and how many hours you can work. It's a myth that you can only work 20 hours. That is a false lie. So it's different for every person based on what you're getting. You might be getting a different Social Security check than you. It's very, very different. So this is an individualized service. So they'll look at what you're getting, what you're receiving, and they'll be able to break that down. So before you actually go out and start looking for a job, if that's going to be the right fit for you, right? There are also a lot of work incentive programs that Social Security has that you can, buy into for your medical. You can have different, there's different work trial months and things like that. But the benefits counselor, I've sat through so many benefits sessions, and it's not for me. Math is not a strong point. But it exists. So that's why we have those benefits counselors that can tell you exactly what that looks like.
Gainful employment, over in some cases, once a month over a 5-year period, you're off SSDI. You hit it under Social Security, the SSI. So there's a lot of things here that are kind of like unknown, and I can't find them specifically addressed by BHDDH or ORS or anybody. This is crucial.
So
we understand the rules of the game and how it comes together with ORS.
So it sounds like your son has an ORS counselor because he's been referred to Launch Beginnings. So what we can do is find out what school.
Music Cranston Transition.
Okay, so then that's Laura Albee. So what we would do is I'm Laura's supervisor, and I can let her know that we are looking at doing some benefits counseling, especially if he's at the Transition Academy. That's something that we can get in place for you, so you can talk to them specifically about your concerns.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I have my card right here too. So if after tonight you're like, what did she say? Or have more questions, I'm available at any time. Well, between the hours of 8:30 and 4. Anyone else?
Okay, that's me.
You go,
And
Sue.
I'm going to break the mold, and I'm going to stand here because I have lots of notes on my laptop that I'll definitely be referring to. And I'm anticipating we're going to have a lot of questions based upon some of the comments that have already been made. So, but that's totally fine. We're here to answer questions and share information. So yes, I'm Susan Hayward. I'm the Administrator of Transition Services at the Division of Development of Disabilities. And I'm responsible for working with ORS and the regional transition coordinators and school districts across the state, our adult service providers, families and advocacy organizations, all about transition services to make sure that we are working together so that transition services are understood and that there's hopefully, it's never going to be seamless, but hopefully a good transition from school into adulthood. So as you just heard from a very lively presentation, ORS is the entity that's initially responsible for providing employment supports for students. And then BHDDH is kind of like the long-term funding partner for that. So we would pick up where ORS leaves off. And if a student has gotten a job or still needs some help to get a job, then we would, if the student was eligible for service, we would be able to start providing funding for a job coach or whatever else is needed, but also provide some funding and support for more whole life planning for that young person. So in your travels, you may have heard people use the term Buddha when you're at a meeting. That's an acronym for BHDDH. It's not an acronym that we've sanctioned. It's just happened because of the,
Everything
BHDDH.
has to be an acronym.
Yeah, so but it gets a little confusing because we're the DD part of BHDDH. So BHDDH is Behavioral Health Care, it's a state department, Behavioral Health Care, Developmental Disabilities, and Hospitals. So the information that I'm giving you tonight is the developmental disabilities part of that department. If you're interested in information about behavioral health services, then the way to access them is usually through flipping over your insurance card and calling the number on the back of your card or going to the local mental health center. But I can also show you something. We're going to be showing you the transition page in a little bit, and I can show you a guidebook there that could be really helpful if you're looking for behavioral health services. The DDD, so the information I'm giving you tonight, we are the point of entry for long-term supports for a young person with an intellectual or developmental disability who's eligible for those kind of services. So, not yet. I have a lot more to say on that. And that's the first one. Okay. So you might be wondering, how do we know of students who might need to have some information about adult services? So we know of students who might benefit from learning about adult services by being invited to an IEP meeting. So transition begins at age 14 in Rhode Island. And so at age 14, if a teacher is working with a student who has an IEP, a career development plan, a CDP, and has an intellectual or developmental disability that looks like they're going to need assistance and services when they move on into adulthood, then that teacher, whether it be a public school or a charter school, would invite us to the IEP meeting, okay? So we have a very formal structure to how teachers invite us. It's a link on our website that they click, they submit the information, and then we have a very structured and formal response as to what we do because of the sheer volume of IEP invites that we get each year, as you can imagine, for kids 14 to 21 Rhode Island's, it's a lot. So generally, if you're between 14 and 16 years of age and we get an invite to that meeting, we don't actually go. There's actually only 2 of us in the state who do this for kids who are 14 to 20. So obviously we can't make it to all those meetings. And very often that age, you're not maybe thinking a lot about adult services, you're hearing about it a little bit, but you're really concentrating on getting through the day in the high school years. So we respond to that invitation and we send a packet of information to the teacher with the understanding that the teacher will share that with the student and their family during the IEP meeting. If you're 17 or 18 years old and we get an invitation, but you haven't yet applied for adult services through DDD, we have a contract with Rhode Island Parent Information Network to go to those meetings. And we've done that because not only can they provide information about adult services, but they can also help students fill out the application and apply. Did you have a question?
Well, I'm just wondering, because you mentioned earlier, my son's 18 and he's a senior. And as far as I know, you guys were never invited. So but I believe he will need help for the rest of his life.
Okay,
So I don't know what I do. What can I
talk to the teacher. You would just let the teacher know that you would like to have BHDDH invited to the next IEP meeting. And then I'm also going to show you where to go to get more information. And I'll definitely give you my phone number and email address so you can also reach out to me as well and have a separate conversation. Yes.
If you're invited in the 14, 16-year-old range and you don't come, but does that then initiate connection, or do you have to re-invite at the 17, 18-year-old to actually get that visit?
Great question. So every year at the annual IEP meeting, the teacher invites us.
Okay.
So
Same for ORS as well. Every year we're invited.
If the teacher does this, we need to make sure the teacher does it, is our part.
Back to that whole, how old are you and what's our BHDH attendance or participation. So 17 or 18, haven't applied yet. We got the invitation, we asked Brian to go to that meeting, okay? If you're 17 or 18 and eligible, or 19 to 20 and eligible or not eligible, we have a transition coordinator. Her name is Carolee Leach, okay? This is a very significant part of her job. She will go to the IEP meeting if she can. Sometimes we get, 2 or 3 meetings all at the same time on the same day, so we can't make all of them, obviously. I'm her backup, and I go to as many as I can, because I feel like as an administrator of this, it keeps me in good touch with what's happening in schools and families, and so I try to go to as many IEP meetings as I can. But we can't make all of them. But she would be the person to go during those ages. If you're 20 and you're eligible for service, we're identifying a social worker, assigning a social worker who's going to go to that meeting and then walk with you through the whole process of transition and into adulthood. Okay, so let me just go a little further. There's a link here. Do you want
Can I
to
pull up the website?
visit the BHDDH website?
This one, the eligibility and.
Okay, so this link on our website takes you to the application and eligibility page that you can see right here for anybody who might be interested in applying for adult services. So to be considered for adult services accessed through the Division of Developmental Disabilities, it is necessary to fill out an application, okay? Adult services, same thing with ORS services, adult services through GTD, they're not an entitlement. They're eligibility based, and you do have to apply for it. There's no cost to it, and it's well worth applying, but just want you to be sure and know that. So this page will bring you to the application. How about clicking on where it says application English? Okay, so this is what the application looks like. You'll see on the first couple of pages, it gives you the information about the eligibility criteria, and it also lets you know what documents to submit with the application, okay? So don't go through that too much just yet, but let's just stop at the beginning for a moment. So we accept applications for students 2 months before they turn 17 years old, okay? That's because as part of planning, as you're going through this transition process, it's good to know whether or not you're going to be eligible for adult services. But you don't have to apply at that age, okay? That's just the earliest that we can accept an application. With the application has to come documents that substantiate an intellectual or developmental disability, okay? So it's not just the application, it's also evaluations that might have been done, like the transition assessments that Dave was talking about earlier. Sometimes you might have a psychological evaluation that you might be able to submit that would help substantiate the disability. It's important for us to receive the IEP and the CDP, the Career Development Plan, because those are really good for future planning because we want to build on what's already been done in school, but those are not enough to determine eligibility. So if you're 16, 17 years old and you know, or your child is going to be going through some kind of an assessment that is going to be giving you more information about their learning needs and the type of abilities and challenges that they have, wait until you get that assessment done and then send that in with the application. Don't send them in separately, okay? Because you have time. 17 is on the very early side of being found eligible or even applying, but you should definitely be applying by the time you're 19 for sure, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so just what happens is once the application comes in, it's reviewed by the eligibility team and they make a determination. You'll get a letter within 30 days telling you whether or not your family member or you are eligible for services, okay? That's one type of letter you might get. If the application and the documents that you sent in were not enough to determine eligibility, you'll get a different letter. And that letter will say what's missing and what you need to submit. All right? The letter that you get, the eligibility letter, if you are eligible for service, that letter will identify who is your assigned person at the division, okay? So if you're under 20 years old, Carolee Leach's name and contact information will be on that letter. If you're 20 or older, you'll immediately get a social worker assigned and that person's name will be on your letter. Now, some of you, I don't know if you have family members who've already been found eligible and you maybe didn't get that kind of a letter, That's because we've just implemented this about 6 months ago. It used to be a more generic letter, and that wasn't all that helpful for families. So we constantly try to figure out how to do this better, and we realized that having a name, a phone number, and an email address would probably be helpful, so that's what we did. Any questions before I go a little further? Okay, try not to be put off by this application. It feels long. And, you know, people do tell us, oh gosh, we just keep putting off that application. It's just too much for us to think about. When you kind of step back from it a little bit, well, actually, we did a review last year of a nationwide search on what is every other state doing in regard to their application to adult services. And we actually found that our application was not as difficult as what you find in other states. Even so, we got some nice feedback on it from the RIPEN and some other advocacy organizations and some educators and family members, and so we revised it and we made it a little more simple. I tell you that only because I want you to know we're constantly trying to do better and be more clear for families, because we know that transition is a tough process and you're meeting all kinds of new people and doing all kinds of things that you haven't done before. So we want to help you through this whole process. All right, we could go back to the PowerPoint. So let's say you are eligible for service, okay? How do you know how much funding you have to use to purchase adult services? We do something called the Supports Intensity Scale, the SIS. You might have heard somebody talk about the SIS. That's a standardized assessment tool that's used across the country and actually in many other countries to determine the level of supports a person needs. And in Rhode Island, we correlate that with a tier, which is a dollar amount. It's an amount of funding that you can use to purchase adult services. So the way we schedule that, SIS, is that if you're 20 when you're applying, the eligibility team immediately makes a request to the SIS supervisor to schedule you for a SIS. Because now you're kind of on the late end of things. We want to get that SIS done as soon as possible, okay? If you're younger than 20, and remember you're going to be assigned to the transition coordinator, then when you're 19 and a half, she sends a request to the SIS supervisor saying, here's the student's name, here's the contact at the school, this is the student's age, they need to have a SIS schedule. At age 20, we have a scheduler who schedules these SIS assessments, okay? That person will reach out to the teacher and say, okay, it's time to schedule the SIS for this student that you have. Here's all the times that we have available over the next month. And usually it's 2 times a day that you can choose. It's just, I think it's 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Those are the typical hours. Sometimes they do it at night, 6 o'clock. But we give the 9 and the 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. hours because we want to make sure the teacher and the members of the school team are there, because they have a lot of really good information that helps when determining how much funding there's going to be available and also what level of supports are needed. So we reach out to the teacher by email, and then the teacher will reach out to the families, okay? So don't be worried if you haven't heard yet. You can always ask us, has it even been considered yet, but don't worry, because you'll hear from the teacher, not a SIS scheduler. And then once the people who would be going to the SIS are coordinated, then the teacher will get back to us and let us know what time works best for the family. So usually it's the teacher or some other members of the school team, family, parents. If there's anybody else that knows your family member very well, maybe you have a PASS worker or an HBTS worker who you think would be a really valuable part of this conversation, they can all come to that meeting. And the student really needs to go as well. They don't have to stay for the whole thing because it can take a while. It can take an hour and a half to do this, go through this assessment. This year, we started doing something in addition to this, and that is that we've added questions to this assessment to really make it more pertinent to Rhode Islanders, because it is a standardized tool that's used across the nation, and we really wanted to make it much closer to, now that we've done it for a while, we understand the kind of things that we need to ask that maybe aren't on that original assessment. So we have additional questions that are asked during that same time frame, but then a week later, after that assessment has been done, oftentimes families will say, oh, I forgot to mention this, or I forgot to say that. So the SIS assessor, the person who sat with you and went through all the questions, they'll call you And they'll say, is there anything that you were thinking about this past week that you felt like you wanted to share and you didn't have a chance to or didn't think about? Please tell me now. And I forgot to tell you that the SIS is actually questions. It's a large number of questions about every area of a person's life. And when you're answering the questions, you answer them with the thinking of, okay, if I or my family member didn't have any support, how would they do in this area? That's your thinking as you're answering all these questions. All right, so after the phone call to you, the SIS is, from the SIS comes a tier. And a tier is a level of funding that you can use to purchase adult services, okay? And I'm gonna show you the tiers in a minute when we get to the website, if I actually still have time for that. All right, so service options. So as I mentioned, once you're eligible, okay, and you're 20, or looks like you're about a year prior to exiting school. So we use 20 as a kind of standard age, but sometimes students leave school earlier than 20. So if you're going to be leaving school at 20, and you're eligible, then at 19, we'll assign a social worker, okay? So we need to know when the student is gonna be exiting school-funded services. These are just the general guidelines that we use. So a social worker is going to be assigned to work with the student, go to the IEP meeting, be in contact with the family, and they're responsible for helping you understand the different models of service that are available in adult service. So there's agency managed services. We have, I think, 34 agencies throughout Rhode Island that are certified and licensed to provide services to adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. So you would get an introduction to how to find out more about those agencies and kind of talk that through a little bit. There's also self-directed services, which is where you only use an agency as a fiscal intermediary, but your family member and you, or perhaps someone you hire, manages the plan. You use the fiscal intermediary only to send the money through so you can pay those people that you're going to be hiring. So if you choose, some people choose that way because it gives you a lot more latitude, but there's also a lot more responsibility. If you use that model, you can choose the rate of pay that you want to pay somebody, but you also have to find the people. So, but you'll get a lot more of this information from the social worker. The other thing the social worker will do is they'll make referrals. So if you've been through a couple of conversations with the social worker, you know that you want to work with an agency, you've done some review looking at agencies and their websites, and you can call the transition contact at the agency, you've gotten some good information, and that's the agency that you and your family member want to go with, the social worker makes the referral for you, okay? And they can make more than one referral at a time. The other thing the social worker will do is they'll talk with you about the natural supports that you have and any kind of community connections that could be something valuable to you in exploring your interests a little more, or even receiving some kind of support, because that's all part of whole life planning in adulthood. It's important to know that your school day looks like one thing, and if you participate in transition services, that could look a little different, like maybe you're spending a little more time in the community, but adult services is vastly different than school, okay? Years ago, it used to look just like school. You'd be picked up by a van, you'd go to a center, you might do some bench work, you might have all your activities in that one building, you get on the van and go home. That is not happening any longer. Much of your life as an adult is taking place on job, in the community, maybe sometime in a center, participating in community activities. So you really want to be thinking about this stuff early on in the transition years, because it's important to know the structure of what you have during the school day will not be the structure of what it is in adulthood. Okay, that's probably maybe a little shocking, I don't know, but it is an important thing to keep in the back of your mind. The other thing that the social worker will do is talk with you about any assistive technology that your family member might be using. So they might be using something for communication. They might be using something to help on the job instead of a job coach. It might be some kind of device that they're using. So they'll ask you about what's being used now, And they also will probably explore, well, what it could be used. They might ask that question at the IEP. You know, is there right now a staff person or a job coach, you know, going to check on somebody all the time when actually you could use an app or something else that might work? So just be aware that that's, of course, it's part of all our features. If you use self-directed supports, they will connect you to a plan writer. Okay, and then you'll, once you've decided, okay, you're gonna do self-directed supports, or you're gonna use an agency, or you're gonna use both at the same time because you can, then you'll sit down with the plan writer. The social worker will help you, connect you to an agency that can make your plan writer. You put together a plan, it'll note all the, you know, the goals and the steps that are gonna be taken to achieve it and who's gonna do what. And it'll go with a purchase order that falls within the amount of funding that you have from the tier, and it will go to the division for review and approval. And once that's approved, you're off and running. There is one other thing the social worker will do, and that is they will help you complete what's called the waiver application. Because in order for us to pay for the adult services that you'll be using, we need to use Medicaid funds. And we have to apply for the Medicaid funds. So you might get Medicaid because you're receiving SSI or for some other reason, but this is more what they call long-term service and supports Medicaid. Okay, so it's an actual application that has to be completed and submitted to the Department of Human Services, but the social worker will help you do that. Okay. The last thing the social worker, oh yeah, go ahead.
Just, when they apply for that Medicaid, is that based on the parent's income?
No.
Okay, so that's a different, because otherwise, okay.
Nope, because I know that's true, under 18, but over 18, it's just that person who's eligible, it's just their income.
Okay.
This is what I have notes, I forgot the last thing. Oh, so the last thing was, yes.
I'm sorry, you
No
said, once they hit 18, but my daughter has Katie Beckett.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
guess until she's like 21. So
Until 19,
until 19, okay.
Yeah.
So until she's 19, she has that.
yes.
So then do we apply or?
Nope, you are actually, this is a beautiful lead into what I was just going to talk
Oh,
about.
sorry, I'm jumping on.
Perfect. No, it's great, yeah. The timeframe of shifting from what I kind of generally call children's funded services to adult services. So I'm not gonna talk too much about that because it can be complicated, but I know by the time you're 19, you're gonna shift from Katie Beckett to a different type of Medicaid so that you still get those children's services because you do get them until you're 21, okay? But at 21, you might need those similar services or some other type of service to start out, even if you're still going to school until you're 22. So you'll talk to the social worker about that and you'll decide, okay, when do I want to shift over to adult services? Some people choose to shift over to adult services. Let's say they've had PASS or HPTS, but they haven't been able to get someone for a long time. And they hear about self-directed supports and say, you know what, that sounds like something I'd like to do, but my son is only 19. I'm supposed to get PASS or HPTS till 21, but I can't find anybody, and he's eligible for service, and I would rather do this self-directed support. You can do that, okay? But you gotta let us know so we can get everything in place for you to go ahead and start that. So like I said, children's services, you get them until 21. They're usually very well funded, so it's not something we want to take lightly about shifting away from. But if you are eligible for adult services and you do choose to use adult services, you can start that after age 18. You can also use it at the same time you're using school-funded services, same time meeting together, but not the same time of day, okay? So let's say on the weekends, say your family member is eligible, they're 20, they're not receiving children's services. On the weekend, you want to have opportunity for them to, connect, do something in the community, go to a class, meet up with friends, learn some independent living skills, kind of build on what's being done in school. You can go ahead and use the adult services at that time. Okay, so you can't use them at the same time that your family member is receiving their school-funded services, but you can use them other hours. Yes.
You mentioned that the children's services, right, that goes all the way up to the age of 18, but on what age does that start?
We can go till 21, actually.
Okay, And start at what age?
I think it was started, that's early as like
Three.
three, yeah. There's actually 2 documents that we put in the packet, that packet for kids who are 14 to 16 and we're not going to the meeting. And there's information sheets about CAS, CTS, and CEDAR centers. Because you access those children's services, the CAS and the HBTS, through the CEDAR centers. So if you want to talk to me later, you can give me your email address and I'll just send you those. Okay, that'll be the easiest way to do it.
Just, something quick. When they have Katie Beckett and they kind of age out, what they put them into is called Magi medication.
Yes,
The Magi medication.
yes,
Right.
yes.
And that will take the parent's income and put it under a formula. So you have to make sure to include the individual on your taxes. Because if you don't, you can't go to the Magi group. Because then they have to be part of the parent's tax filing for the previous year.
Yeah, that's the Department of Human Services, separate from the PUS. It can be a little complicated, so I'm very hesitant to say anything about it.
That's what I learned from them when I called them
Okay.
up and I had an issue.
I mean, it's not like I'm gonna leave you in the lurch. If you want to connect with somebody about that, like I said, I'll give you my email address and I'll help you do that, okay? The primary thing I wanna leave you with is children's services are available until 21, and they're typically very well funded. Okay, so it might feel confusing, well, my son is eligible for adult services, but what are they doing? They're just kind of hanging there, well, that's okay, because we're going to your IEP meeting, we're available for you to contact at any time, we can answer questions, and then when you get closer to needing adult service, we'll be more familiar, and you can start, having hopefully a better transition. Okay, so last one is, can you click on the transition to adult services? Yeah. I just want to do I have time for this? I don't even know what time it is. What time was it supposed to end?
Like 7:30-ish.
Okay. Okay, go. So this is a
Go for it, Sue.
this is a transition page. It's on the BHDDH website, bhdh.ri.gov.
It's a great website.
And thank you. And then you just scroll across, you go to developmental disabilities, click on the arrow, and transition to adult services comes up. If you just scroll down.
And it looks like a lot of those things you talked about are right here on the side.
They
so
are,
they need-
yes, yep. To the first box, okay, transition age guides, we just did these about 4 months ago. A lot of input from families and advocacy organizations.
I'm gonna open it up.
If you click, yeah, please do. This is, just we tried to keep it as simple as possible, step by step, it kind of says the same thing that I just said, okay, except in steps. So that you can look at this after this presentation and know, okay, what did she say? What step am I close to and what do I need to do? So that's a good guide to help you with that. If you could go back to the main page. There's a timeline that might be helpful over to the right. Yeah, we did this one actually a couple years ago, but it goes by age. So depending on what age your child is, just look at that timeline and it'll give you an idea of what are the things I need to be thinking about and talking about at the IEP meeting right now. So that goes from 14 to 22. So that might be kind of helpful. There's a brochure there, which just gives you a very general overview of the steps. It's a trifold, so it looks a little confusing right there, but you can look at that. Very broken down. Okay, what might make me eligible? How do I apply? Okay. How about the transition DD contact list right there? Yeah. So we made sure that of all our 34 agencies that we identified a transition contact in those agencies. So that you're not calling an agency and not knowing who to ask for if you're trying to get more information from the adult service provider. So if these are all the people within those agencies that you would call, with their email address, their phone number, and the agency that they work for, okay? You could go back again if you would, please. We also have a list of agencies. You would have to go to there we go, you're all on it. So the second one down, licensed providers. You have to open up the document that comes up. All our agencies have a website, so you can just kind of look over their websites and get a sense of what they're all about, what services they offer. Right there, you click on the link that's underneath their name, okay? We also have a list of the fiscal intermediaries, so if you decided to go with self-directed supports, there's, I think, 5 agencies that do that, and you can look at their websites too. But they're the same agencies that provide the other services as well. I would like to show people how to sign up for the newsletter, because that's how to get ongoing current information from our division. So over to the left, yes, newsletters, forums, and events, you just go to that. And just saying how to sign up for the newsletter.
All right, you have to
Oh,
click
there
the
we
main
go.
page
Here's
there.
big bold letters, sign up for the BHDH newsletter. Very simple. Just click that, 2 fields to fill out. You submit it, then you're going to be getting an email that tells you everything that's going on in the division, okay? And it also includes a staff list, you know, some opportunities that might be out there, some interesting research, you know, it's a good thing to belong to. Looks like you're going to be using adult services. If you go just back to that last page, quarterly, we hold what's called community forums, and they're facilitated by Advocates in Action, which is an advocacy organization. But they invite our director and all the people working at the division who are working in different areas like employment, or, you know, I go to those and share information. Kind of the major things that are happening at the division. It's virtual. And we present information. We give everybody an update on what's going on. We do that 4 times a year with that managed by Advocates in Action. So you could go to them, you can sign up and go, or you can watch them if you want. I don't think you can watch them here though, can you? No, you'd have to go to the Advocates in Action website to watch those documents.
Oh yeah, to review recordings of past forums.
So there you
Make a
go.
link for it.
Thank you, you're very good at that. Thank you. I said I was going to show you the rates, but I feel like I've been talking forever. So does anyone have questions? I mean, I can, but yes.
So I work for an agency with early childhood, and we encounter wait lists everywhere. Is there a wait list for any of these services?
There might be.
Okay.
There's not a wait list to be found eligible, but the pandemic decimated staffing
Absolutely, yeah.
in human service agencies across the nation. And not just adult service, but children's services, nursing homes, hospitals, teachers, I mean, everywhere. And so the build back from that has been very focused in the adult world. We went over the past year and a half from a direct support professional making, I think, $11 an hour to now across the board, even in self-directed services, they must make no less than $20 an hour. And we're working on developing a curriculum for direct support professionals and also a credentialing to make it more of a career. And that's to, encourage people to, have this as a job, and also an incentive to stay in it and actually make it a career. So we're doing better at that. Our agencies have been able to hire more people as a result of some of those steps, but they're still not enough. That's another reason why we really encourage making connections in the community when you're in high school, considering your natural supports and where you could use something like that, considering technology, because there will never be enough staff for all the hours that you might want. The other thing is, that's why I'm so excited about that Starfire Ohio partnership with Best Life Rhode Island, because it really talks about, there's a tendency to start, your whole life ends up being focused on, well, I have to make sure that I fill out these forms and I talk with people who, control the money to make sure they understand how badly I need the service. And then you start, that becomes your focus of, I gotta make sure I get this service. And it kind of dictates your thinking. But really, there will never be enough service. So really it's about, how am I broadening my life and enriching my life and including people in my life, not based upon my needs, but based upon things that we share and interests that we have together. It's hard, I know. But that is reality too for adult service. Like I said, it's very different. For example, if you get PT, OT, speech through your school, when you move into adult services, you will get those through your insurer, not through an agency. Okay? Real thing to think about. So anyway, yes, some of the agencies will say, you know, I can accept a referral in 6 months.
Okay,
They might say that.
so get on it quick.
Yes, and that's why we assign social workers earlier.
Got it.
Okay. Anybody else?
All right, thank you, Sue. And thank you, Kristen and Teresa. And thank you all for coming out. It was a lot of information. Like I said, we will be emailing you the copy of the PowerPoint. There are links for everybody's contacts on there. So if you have any follow-up questions or anything, please reach out. Great.
I do, before we end, when I send all of this out to all of you, I'm going to include a little form for a little feedback. Your input is really important to us about, how we move forward, what different things we can offer the community, what types of things you're interested in. So if you could fill that out when you get it, that would be great and helpful. But thanks for coming. Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Put that in there.
Thank you.
I think it's that you were.
Thank you.
Yes, it's the original one.